welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. UN Emergency Coordination Center, New York. Date: March 15, 2025. Time: 14:30 Universal Time Coordinated. Officer: Daxon Rill, Senior Emergency Coordination Specialist. Classification: routine elevated. The coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but I kept sipping it anyway. March afternoons in the UN Emergency Coordination Center carried a particular stillness. The kind that made you forget the world outside these reinforced walls was spinning through space at 1,000 miles per hour, carrying 8 billion souls who mostly had no idea how many invisible threads kept their lives stitched together. My workstation displayed the global communications grid in soft blue lines across 6 monitors. Routine check-ins from 193 member nations, their status indicators pulsing green like electronic heartbeats. Everything normal. Everything according to protocol. Daxon, you seeing this delay on the African Union feed? Talia Wren's voice cut through the ambient hum of servers and air conditioning. She sat 3 workstations over, her dark hair pulled back in the same precise bun she'd worn every day for the past 2 years. Talia approached communication systems like a surgeon approached organs, with reverence for their complexity and deep suspicion of their fragility. I pulled up the AU diplomatic channel on my secondary monitor. The timestamp showed a 7-minute delay on their routine infrastructure report. Not unusual, but worth noting. Probably routing through the backup satellite, I said, making a note in the daily log. Madagascar's been having atmospheric interference all week. Maybe. Her fingers moved across her keyboard with the rapid precision of someone who thought in code. But I'm seeing similar delays on 3 other channels. You showing 4 minutes, ASEAN showing 6, and... She paused, frowning at her screen. That's odd. What? The encryption headers are corrupted on the Nordic Council feed. Just random character strings where the authentication codes should be. I swiveled my chair to face her workstation. The Nordic feed was one of our most reliable. Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden maintained communication protocols that were military-grade precise. They didn't send corrupted headers. When did it start? About 20 minutes ago, right around 14:10 Universal Time Coordinated. Talia's fingers flew over her keyboard, pulling up diagnostic screens. I'm running a trace now, but the corruption isn't consistent. It's like someone's typing random letters into a diplomatic transmission. The cold coffee suddenly tasted metallic. I'd been monitoring global communications for 6 years, since the UN expanded the Emergency Coordination Center after the 2019 cyber attacks. You developed instincts in this job. Right now, those instincts were telling me that random wasn't random. Pull up the global status board, I said, walking over to the main display wall. The massive screen showed a real-time map of the world, each nation color-coded by communication status and infrastructure health. Green for normal, yellow for minor issues, red for critical problems, black for complete communication loss. Everything was green except for 3 small yellow indicators in Central Africa, routine maintenance windows that had been scheduled for weeks. Daxon, Talia's voice had changed. The casual professionalism was gone, replaced by something tighter. I need you to look at this. I returned to her workstation. She'd opened a cascade view of all incoming diplomatic channels from the past hour. At first glance, everything looked normal. The usual flow of trade reports, cultural exchanges, routine diplomatic check-ins that kept the world's nations talking to each other every day. But when you looked at the timestamps, a pattern emerged. 14:07 Universal Time Coordinated. Nordic Council encryption corruption begins. 14:09 Universal Time Coordinated. ASEAN Coalition transmission delay increases to 6 minutes. 14:11 Universal Time Coordinated. European Union authentication timeout errors. 14:13 Universal Time Coordinated. African Union complete signal degradation. 14:15 Universal Time Coordinated. Organization of American States switching to backup protocols. 5 major regional bodies, I said quietly. All within 8 minutes. 6, Talia corrected, pointing to a new alert that had just appeared. Pacific Island Forum just went to emergency backup. Their primary communication satellite is showing. This is impossible. What? According to their diagnostic feed, their satellite is broadcasting from the wrong orbital position, like it moved 300 kilometers east overnight. She looked up at me, her usually composed expression cracking. Satellites don't just move, Daxon. They can't. My secure phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Valrin Knox, our field coordinator currently stationed at the European Crisis Management Center in Brussels. I answered on the second ring. Knox, what's your status? Unusual, sir. Valrin's Yorkshire accent carried clearly over the encrypted line, but there was static underneath, the kind of interference we hadn't heard since the old analog days. We're tracking multiple infrastructure anomalies across the EU grid. Power fluctuations, internet routing failures, transportation coordination glitches. Nothing critical yet, but it's synchronized, sir. Like someone's testing the system, poking at weak points to see what breaks. I looked at Talia, who was now pulling up power grid monitors for major population centers. The displays showed minor fluctuations, nothing that would cause blackouts, but enough to suggest something was probing the edges of global infrastructure. Knox, I need you to coordinate with Brussels and verify their communication systems. We're seeing anomalies here that suggest. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. The secure satellite network that connected UN coordination centers didn't just drop calls. Ever. These systems had been designed with triple redundancy specifically to prevent communication failures during global emergencies. Talia, run a full diagnostic on our communication array. Now, she was already moving, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards as she initiated system checks. Primary satellite array shows green, backup systems operational, landline network stable. Her voice trailed off. What is it? 3 nations just went black. I spun toward the main display. The global status board still showed mostly green, but now there were 3 black dots where there had been green indicators just moments before. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, 3 Baltic nations, all simultaneously showing complete communication blackout. Equipment failure? I asked, knowing the answer. Negative. Their last transmissions were normal routine check-ins. No distress signals, no system warnings, no indication of technical problems. Talia's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly as she worked. It's like they just stopped talking. I picked up the red phone, the direct line to the Secretary General's crisis team. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, it connected. This is Daxon Rill Emergency Coordination. We have a developing situation that requires immediate attention. 3 member nations have simultaneously lost all communication capability, and we're seeing coordinated anomalies across multiple regional networks. Understood, Mr. Rill. Please hold for Deputy Secretary General Martinez. The hold music was Vivaldi. I found myself wondering if that was someone's idea of irony, playing classical music while the modern world's communication infrastructure showed signs of systematic failure. The music stopped. Daxon, this is Elena Martinez. What exactly are we looking at? Ma'am, at 14:07 Universal Time Coordinated, we began detecting communication anomalies across major regional diplomatic networks. Encryption corruption, signal delays, authentication failures. As of 3 minutes ago, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have gone completely dark. No communication, no explanation, no prior indication of technical problems. Infrastructure attack? Unknown. but the pattern suggests coordinated interference rather than random system failure. We're tracking similar anomalies across EU power grids and transportation networks. There was a pause. I could hear muffled conversation in the background, other voices discussing protocols and response procedures. Daxon, I'm activating Emergency Protocol 7. Coordinate with regional centers and maintain continuous monitoring. If we lose contact with any major nation, I want to know immediately. Understood, Mom. The line went dead. I hung up the red phone and turned back to Talia, who was staring at her screens with the expression of someone watching a slow-motion catastrophe unfold. How many nations are we tracking now? I asked. 190. She paused. We should be tracking 193. The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a ceramic crack that seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly quiet coordination center. On the main display, the global status map flickered once, as if the entire system had hiccuped. When it stabilized, there were 6 black dots where there had been 3. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, North Macedonia, Montenegro, all dark, all silent, all gone. I reached for my secure phone to call Knox back, but before I could dial, Talia's voice cut through the silence. Daxon. Her voice was barely above a whisper. We just lost the entire Pacific Island Forum. 14 nations. Simultaneously, the world map flickered again. This time, when it cleared, a cluster of black dots dotted the Pacific Ocean like scattered ink drops. 20 nations dark. No explanations. No warnings. Just gone. Date: March 15th, 2025. Time: 15:45 Universal Time Coordinated. Officer: Daxon Rill, Senior Emergency Coordination Specialist. Classification: Elevated Critical. The Emergency Coordination Center had transformed in the past hour. What had been a quiet afternoon monitoring routine became controlled chaos. Every workstation was occupied. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh white, and the constant chatter of secure communications created a background hum that reminded me of a beehive under attack. 23 nations dark now. 3 more had gone silent while Deputy Secretary General Martinez briefed the Security Council. I stood before the main display wall, watching the global status map like a doctor studying a patient's vital signs during cardiac arrest. The black dots weren't random, I could see that now. They formed clusters, patterns that suggested something far more systematic than equipment failures or natural disasters. Daxon, I've got the infrastructure correlation analysis you requested. Talia appeared beside me, tablet in hand, her usually perfect bun now showing stress-loosened strands. It's worse than we thought. She handed me the tablet. The screen showed a time-lapse visualization of global infrastructure failures over the past 6 hours. Power grid fluctuations appeared as yellow pulses, communication failures as red streaks, transportation disruptions as orange clusters. When viewed in sequence, they formed a wave pattern moving from east to west, following the Earth's rotation. Jesus, I whispered. It started in the Far East around 8 o'clock local time in multiple zones, Talia explained, her voice tight with controlled panic. Minor power fluctuations in major cities: Seoul, Tokyo, Manila, Jakarta. Nothing that triggered alerts, just the kind of grid instability you'd expect from solar flare activity or atmospheric conditions. But it wasn't solar weather. No. The fluctuations were too precise, too coordinated. They were testing load capacity, measuring response times, mapping redundancies. She swiped to the next screen. By 10 o'clock local time, communication satellites over the Pacific began showing orbital irregularities, just like the Nordic satellite we detected earlier. I studied the data, trying to process what I was seeing. Someone's been probing global infrastructure for hours, testing weaknesses. Not someone. Talia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Multiple coordinated agents. The attack vectors are too complex, too simultaneous for a single source. This is... She paused, looking around the busy coordination center before continuing. This looks like a coordinated stress test of global civilization infrastructure. My secure phone buzzed. Knox calling back from Brussels. Knox report. Sir, we've lost contact with the Nordic Emergency Council entirely. Last transmission was 1522 Universal Time Coordinated. Routine infrastructure report. Then complete communication blackout. His voice carried more static now, and I could hear what sounded like alarms in the background. Brussels is implementing full emergency protocols. The EU Parliament is evacuating as a precautionary measure. What's your read on the situation there? Coordinated, sir. Someone's systematically testing European infrastructure resilience. Power grids, communication networks, transportation control systems, they're all being probed simultaneously. It's like they're mapping our dependencies to find the critical failure points. I watched the status board flicker again. When it stabilized, 2 more nations had gone dark: Czech Republic and Slovakia. Knox, I need you to coordinate with any remaining European emergency centers. Establish backup communication protocols using military channels if necessary. This looks like a coordinated attack on global infrastructure, and we need to maintain contact with. The line went dead again. I stared at my phone. 2 dropped calls with Knox in 2 hours. The satellite network connecting UN coordination centers was military-grade, designed to survive nuclear conflict. It didn't drop calls because of technical problems. Talia, run diagnostics on our satellite communication array. Full spectrum analysis. Already running. She was back at her workstation, multiple screens showing signal analysis data. Our primary satellite is showing micro-adjustments in orbital position, just like the Nordic satellite earlier. Someone's been making tiny course corrections to communication satellites worldwide. Course corrections for what purpose? Unknown, but I can make an educated guess. She pulled up a orbital mechanics simulation. If you wanted to disrupt global communications systematically, you wouldn't destroy satellites. Too obvious, too permanent. You'd just nudge them slightly off their optimal positions. Signal degradation would appear gradual, like equipment aging or atmospheric interference. The implications hit me like cold water. How many satellites? I'm detecting orbital anomalies in 47 communication satellites across 6 different orbital planes. The adjustments are minimal, just enough to degrade signal quality and create authentication failures. 47 satellites. The backbone of global digital communication, slowly being moved out of optimal position by someone with the technical capability to hack satellite navigation systems. My workstation chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender ID showed Cassira Bloom, our crisis psychologist stationed at the Geneva Emergency Analysis Center. From c.bloom.geneva.emergency to d.ril.nyc.coordination.
Priority, urgent.
Time: 1552 Universal Time Coordinated. Daxon monitoring global media and social networks. Panic levels rising exponentially in affected regions. Citizens reporting coordinated infrastructure failures. Traffic systems, banking networks, emergency services communication. Pattern suggests systematic testing of social stress responses rather than random technical failures. Population behavior indicating awareness that this is coordinated rather than accidental. Recommend immediate public information protocols to prevent mass panic. Current trajectory suggests complete social system breakdown within 12 to 18 hours if communication blackouts continue expanding. C. Bloom, crisis psychology specialist. I forwarded Cassira's message to the Deputy Secretary General's crisis team and pulled up global news feeds on my secondary monitor. The headlines told the story Cassira had outlined. BBC: widespread communication failures across Eastern Europe. CNN: technical glitches plague global infrastructure. Reuters: multiple nations report simultaneous system breakdowns. Al Jazeera: coordinated cyber attack suspected as communications fail. The news outlets were trying to maintain calm, but the comments sections and social media feeds showed a different story. People weren't buying the technical difficulties explanation. They could see the pattern too. Talia, what's our current count? 28 nations completely dark. 43 more showing degraded communications. She looked up from her screens, her face pale under the emergency lighting. At this rate of expansion, we'll lose contact with over half the world's nations within the next 6 hours. The main display flickered again. This time, when it cleared, a large section of Eastern Europe had gone black. Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, for more nations gone in a single update cycle. 32 nations dark. My workstation phone rang, the landline, not the satellite system. I grabbed it on the first ring. Real Emergency Coordination. Daxon. This is Director Chan at the Beijing Crisis Center. The voice was distorted by static, but I could make out the words. We're losing contact with regional coordination centers. Can you confirm your satellite array is operational? Operational but compromised. We're tracking orbital irregularities in communication satellites worldwide. What's your status? 40% of our regional communication network is down. Infrastructure systems showing coordinated failure patterns. This isn't technical malfunction. Someone's systematically dismantling global communication infrastructure. Through the static, I heard what sounded like evacuation announcements in the background. Director Chan, are you evacuating your facility? Precautionary measure. If this is coordinated infrastructure attack, command centers will be primary targets. We're moving to backup locations with hardened communication systems. The line crackled with static, then went dead. I hung up the phone and turned to find Talia staring at her workstation screen with an expression of absolute horror. What is it? I've been analyzing the orbital adjustments to the communication satellites, she said quietly. They're not random. They're precisely calculated to create expanding communication dead zones based on population density and infrastructure interdependencies. Meaning, whoever's doing this has detailed intelligence on global infrastructure vulnerabilities. They know exactly which communication links to sever to cause maximum system disruption with minimal effort. She looked up at me. Daxon, this isn't just an attack on communication systems. It's a coordinated collapse of global civilization infrastructure. As if summoned by her words, every alarm in the Emergency Coordination Center began sounding simultaneously. The main display wall flashed red, and automated announcement systems activated. Attention! Global communication emergency. Multiple nation-state contact lost. Implementing Crisis Protocol Alpha. All personnel to emergency stations. I looked at the status board. The wave of black dots was spreading westward across Europe like spilled ink on paper. In the past 10 minutes, we'd lost contact with 12 more nations. 44 nations dark. No explanations. No warnings. Just systematic, coordinated silence spreading across the globe like a digital plague. And the wave was moving west, toward the Americas. Toward us. UN Emergency Coordination Center, New York. Operator, Daxon Rill, Senior Emergency Specialist. Date. Timestamp error. Unable to sync. Security level Alpha 7. The fluorescent lights in Situation Room C have been flickering for the past hour. Not the slow, dying flutter of old bulbs, sharp, erratic strobes that make my eyes water when I try to focus on the wall displays. Maintenance says it's a minor electrical anomaly. Everything's becoming an anomaly these days. Arden Shore arrived 20 minutes ago with her cybersecurity team, wheeling in enough monitoring equipment to stock a small data center. Her usual confidence has been replaced by something I haven't seen from her before: genuine concern. When Arden looks worried, the rest of us should be terrified. Show me the correlation matrix again, she says, not bothering with pleasantries. Her fingers dance across 3 keyboards simultaneously while her team patches into our secure networks. I pull up the global communications grid on the main display. 47 nations now showing various degrees of communication degradation. The pattern that Talia identified yesterday has become impossible to ignore. The failures aren't random. They're following infrastructure dependency chains like dominoes falling in slow motion. Here, I point to the European cluster. Norway went dark at 14:32 Greenwich Mean Time. Sweden lost connectivity exactly 47 minutes later. Denmark followed at 16:01. 47 minutes. Arden mutters, her eyes never leaving her screens. That's not a coincidence. That's a propagation delay. Talia enters the room carrying a tablet and 3 cups of coffee that smell like they've been brewing since the Cold War. Her usually immaculate appearance shows signs of the 18-hour shifts we've all been pulling. Wrinkled shirt, hair escaping its ponytail, dark circles that makeup can't quite hide. The Scandinavian Grid Authority confirmed my suspicions, Talia says, setting the coffee down with shaking hands. Their power distribution follows a hub-and-spoke model. Norway was the primary hub. Someone's targeting infrastructure interdependencies, Arden says without looking up. This isn't system failure. This is systems warfare. The word hangs in the air like smoke. Warfare. We've been calling it a crisis, a technical emergency, even a catastrophic failure. But warfare implies intent. Warfare implies an enemy. My secure phone buzzes. Secretary General Okafor's office. I accept the encrypted connection. Daxon, what's your assessment? Her voice carries the weight of someone who hasn't slept in days. Ma'am, we're looking at coordinated infrastructure attacks. Possibly state-sponsored, definitely sophisticated. They're not just taking down communications, they're targeting the foundational systems that everything else depends on. Static crackles through the connection. How long until the line cuts to digital silence? I try calling back. Nothing. The secure line to the Secretary General's office, protected by 7 layers of encryption and hardened against electromagnetic interference, is dead. Arden, did you? I didn't touch anything. Her voice is tight. But I'm seeing massive data packet loss across all UN internal networks. Someone just hit us directly. The main display flickers, showing cascading red indicators across our global monitoring network. South America's communication backbone is showing signs of strain. Australia's eastern seaboard has lost contact with their western territories. India's digital infrastructure is reporting anomalous traffic patterns. Valrin Knox's voice crackles through the intercom. Daxon, you need to see this. Conference room B now. We find Valrin standing before a wall of monitors displaying global satellite feeds. His field coordinator uniform is rumpled. His usually perfect posture slumped with exhaustion. Thermal imaging from our emergency observation satellites, he says, pointing to a series of infrared displays. These are major population centers that have gone dark in the last 48 hours. The images show cities from above, heat signatures revealing the truth that communication blackouts hide. Some cities are cooling rapidly, no power, no heating, minimal human activity. Others show strange patterns, geometric heat distributions that don't match normal urban layouts. That's not random power loss, Talia whispers, studying the thermal patterns. Look at the symmetry. Those are controlled shutdowns. Or controlled something else, Arden adds grimly. I study the satellite feeds, my training in emergency coordination trying to process what I'm seeing. The heat patterns in several cities show evacuation corridors, organized, planned movement of populations. But our intelligence indicates these cities went dark suddenly, without warning. How do you evacuate a city of 3 million people without anyone knowing? Ask. You don't, Valrin says. Unless they knew it was coming. The implication settles over us like a physical weight. Some of these communication blackouts aren't failures, they're deliberate disconnections. Nations going dark by choice, not by attack. My tablet chimes with an incoming priority message. The sender ID is scrambled, but the routing suggests it originated from within the UN emergency network. The message itself is simple: investigation team compromised. Abort current protocols. Trust no official channels. Pattern analysis correct but incomplete. Collapse is scheduled, not random. Prepare for acceleration. Did anyone else receive? I begin, but Arden cuts me off with a raised hand. Someone's in our network, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Active intrusion, high-level access. They're watching everything we do. The lights flicker again, but this time they don't come back on. Emergency power kicks in, bathing the room in red light that makes everything look like a crime scene. Through the emergency lighting, Talia's face has gone pale. If they can access our secure networks, if they knew we'd discover the pattern. She doesn't finish the sentence. Then we're not investigating the crisis. I say, understanding flooding through me. We're part of it. My hands shake as I reach for the secure communication device that will connect me to emergency command. But as my fingers touch the keypad, I hesitate. If our networks are compromised, if official channels can't be trusted, then this investigation has become something else entirely. Outside the window, New York's skyline still glitters with lights. But for how much longer? And when those lights go out, when this city joins the growing list of dark zones across the globe, will anyone be left to coordinate the response? The emergency power flickers. In the brief darkness, I see the reflection of 4 people who came here to investigate a crisis and discovered they might be the next targets. When the lights come back, we're no longer investigators. We're survivors preparing for war. UN Emergency Coordination Center, New York. Operator, Daxon Rill, Senior Emergency Specialist. Time. Local clock unreliable. Estimating 0347 hours. Status. Critical infrastructure failure imminent. The coffee stopped working 6 hours ago. Not just our machine, every automated system in the building. Card readers, elevators, climate control, even the electronic locks on the bathroom stalls. Whatever hit our networks didn't just compromise our communications. It lobotomized our infrastructure. I'm writing this by the light of my laptop screen, battery at 37%. The emergency generators kicked in around midnight, but they're cycling inconsistently. 12 minutes on, 4 minutes off, like the building itself is having seizures. Arden hasn't slept. She's hunched over her equipment, cables snaking across the floor to jury-rigged power sources. Her cybersecurity team evacuated 2 hours ago when their department head received urgent recall orders that none of us had authorized. She stayed, said she'd rather face the unknown here than abandon the investigation. I've got partial connectivity to the European Emergency Network, she calls out, her voice hoarse. You're not going to like what I'm seeing. I navigate around the cables to peer at her screen. A map of Europe glows with red zones spreading like spilled wine. Britain, France, Germany, all showing complete communication blackout. The pattern we identified yesterday has accelerated beyond our worst projections. How long? Ask. At this rate? 48 hours until total European grid collapse. Maybe less if the cascade hits the transatlantic cables. Talia bursts through the door, tablet clutched against her chest. Her usually calm demeanor has cracked completely. Wide eyes, rapid breathing, the look of someone who's seen something that shouldn't exist. The Asian Emergency Council just issued a global distress call, she says, words tumbling over each other. Japan, South Korea, Philippines, all reporting simultaneous infrastructure failures. But Daxon, the timing, it's impossible. She shows me her tablet. Satellite timestamp data from emergency broadcasts across the Pacific Rim. Every major city reporting critical failures within a 3-minute window. 3 minutes, I repeat, across 12 time zones, coordinated to the second, Talia confirms. Whatever's causing this, it's not following natural propagation patterns. It's following a schedule. The implications make my chest tight. Natural disasters follow physics. Earthquakes radiate from epicenters. Fires spread with wind patterns. Floods follow topography. But this collapse is following a timetable, like someone planned exactly when each system would fail. Vailrin's voice echoes through the building's emergency communication system. All personnel to conference room A. Priority Alpha emergency briefing. We find him standing before a wall of flickering monitors, some displaying maps, others showing cascading lines of data that look like digital rainfall. His field coordinator's composure has finally cracked. Sweat stains under his arms, his usually perfect uniform wrinkled from sleeping at his desk. "I've been in contact with emergency coordinators worldwide." He begins without preamble. "What we're seeing isn't random system failure. It's a demonstration." Demonstration of what? Arden demands. "Global infrastructure vulnerability assessment." His voice is flat, mechanical. Someone is systematically testing every critical system on the planet. He clicks to the next display, a world map showing communication blackouts, but with strange additions, green zones scattered across the dark regions. Small pockets of maintained connectivity within the larger failure zones. These green areas, he continues, are showing perfect infrastructure performance despite being surrounded by total system collapse. Medical facilities maintaining power during grid failures. Communication hubs operating normally while everything around them goes dark. Cassira Bloom enters the room carrying an armload of printed reports. Our crisis psychologist looks like she's been through psychological warfare herself. Dark circles, trembling hands, the careful control of someone fighting panic. "Mass casualty reports from still-connected regions," she says, distributing papers. "But the numbers don't add up. We should be seeing millions of casualties from infrastructure collapse, but actual reported deaths are minimal." I scan the reports. Emergency services responding to power failures, communication breakdowns, transportation shutdowns, but the human cost is surprisingly low. Too low. "It's like they're testing our systems without wanting to kill us," Talia murmurs. "Or they're saving us for something else," Arden adds grimly. The building's emergency power cycles off. In the darkness, our laptop screens and battery-powered devices cast an eerie glow. When the power returns, every monitor in the room displays the same message. Global infrastructure assessment entering phase 2. Estimated completion: 72 hours. Casualty projections: acceptable parameters. Continue standard emergency protocols. Phase 2. Cassira's voice cracks slightly. Before anyone can answer, my secure satellite phone, the one with hardened encryption and independent power supply, chirps with an incoming call. The display shows Secretary General Okafor's priority code. "Ma'am, thank God. We need to coordinate." "Daxon." Her voice is wrong. Too calm, too controlled. "You need to cease all investigation activities immediately." "Ma'am, we've discovered this isn't random system failure. Someone is deliberately—" "I said cease investigation." The line is crystal clear despite global communication failures. "You and your team are to report to Security Council Chamber 1 for immediate debriefing." Something cold spreads through my chest. "Ma'am, our investigation has revealed that this collapse follows a planned schedule. We have evidence. Report to Chamber 1, Daxon." "That's an order." The line goes dead. The silence that follows is broken only by the hum of emergency power and the distant sound of sirens from the city below. Arden's equipment suddenly springs to life, screens flooding with data. "Massive network intrusion," she says, typing frantically. "Someone just accessed our entire investigation database. Can you stop them? They're not stealing data." Her face goes pale. "They're updating it, rewriting our findings in real time." I watch over her shoulder as our carefully documented evidence of coordinated infrastructure attacks transforms into reports of natural system failures. Our timeline of suspicious coordination becomes a standard cascade failure analysis. Even our satellite imagery showing planned evacuations changes to show routine emergency responses. "They're erasing our investigation," Talia whispers. Through the window, Manhattan's skyline begins to flicker. Not the random pattern of rolling blackouts, but systematic grid sections shutting down in sequence. Like someone drawing lines through the city with a marker, erasing blocks of light one by one. Vailrin checks his communication device. "I'm receiving evacuation orders for all non-essential UN personnel." "From who?" Ask. He stares at the device. I'm not sure. The authorization codes are correct, but I don't recognize the issuing authority." The building's intercom crackles to life. "All emergency coordination personnel report to assigned evacuation stations immediately." This is not a drill. Phase 2 protocols are now in effect. We look at each other in the red emergency lighting. Outside, the planned darkness continues spreading across the city. Above us, helicopters circle with searchlights, but they're not searching for survivors. They're herding people toward specific locations. The debriefing, I say finally. We have to decide right now. Do we report to Chamber 1 and hope the Secretary General can explain what's happening? Or do we accept that our own organization might be compromised? Kasaira's psychological training cuts through the group uncertainty. In crisis situations, when authority figures begin acting inconsistently and information sources become unreliable, the safest assumption is that normal command structures have been compromised. The building shudders slightly. Through the windows, I can see convoy trucks arriving at the UN Plaza. Military vehicles, but with unfamiliar markings. Phase 2, Arden says quietly. Whatever they tested in Phase 1, they're moving to implementation. My laptop chimes with a new message. The sender is listed as Emergency Coordination Backup Protocol, but I've never seen that designation before. Daxon Rill, Investigation Team Alpha 7. Your findings regarding coordinated infrastructure assessment are accurate. Phase 2 will commence global population reorganization. Standard evacuation protocols will deliver personnel to designated processing centers. Recommend immediate facility abandonment. This is your only warning. The message deletes itself as I finish reading. Through the window, the convoys have surrounded the building. Spotlights sweep the upper floors, and I can see figures in tactical gear deploying from vehicles. They're not here to evacuate us, I say, understanding flooding through me with horrible clarity. They're here to collect us. The investigation is over. Phase 2 has begun. And whatever scheduled collapse we've been documenting, we're about to become part of it. The elevator cables sing with approaching machinery. Time to decide. Surrender to authorities we can no longer trust, or become refugees in a world where going dark might be the only way to stay alive. Emergency Coordination Log, Day 4, Hour 73 post-initial blackout. UN Emergency Operations Center, New York. Reporting Officer, Daxon Rill, Senior Emergency Coordinator. Classification, Critical, Global Scope. The Secretary General's hand trembled as she reached for the emergency broadcast microphone. I'd never seen her lose composure in 12 years of crisis management, but the overnight reports had broken something fundamental in all of us. 47 nations, Talia whispered from her communications station, her voice hollow. Complete blackout. No response on any frequency. The wall of monitors that usually showed our global network now displayed a sea of red error messages and flatlined connection indicators. I should document this properly. Protocol demands it. But how do you write a report when the world is ending in real time? 0347 hours. European Union Emergency Council declares communication with Eastern European members indefinitely suspended. Power grid failures cascading through Germanic regions. Automated systems beginning shutdown sequences to prevent infrastructure damage. 0352 hours. Australian Prime Minister's final transmission cut mid-sentence. Satellite imagery shows Sydney metropolitan area completely dark. No response from backup communication systems. 0356 hours. Secretary General authorizes Global Collapse Declaration under UN Emergency Charter Article 47. Never been used. Written in 1952, they never expected we'd actually need it. Kasaira appeared beside me, her crisis psychology training finally showing strain. Daxon, the psychological profiles are unprecedented. The remaining connected populations are showing mass panic responses. Social order breaking down in real time. She clutched a tablet showing social media feeds, the ones still functional. Viral videos of people fleeing cities, empty grocery stores, families barricading themselves in homes. The Secretary General's voice echoed through the Emergency Operations Center. Citizens of the world, I address you under the gravest circumstances in human history. The United Nations Security Council has unanimously declared a state of global collapse. Valrin burst through the security doors, his field coordinator vest torn and dirt-stained. Daxon, the situation outside, it's chaos. Mass evacuations started 3 hours ago, but the transportation systems are failing. Trains stopping mid-route, airports shutting down flight operations. People are walking, millions of them just walking. Communication systems worldwide have suffered coordinated failures. At this time, 47 member nations are completely offline. We are implementing emergency protocols for resource distribution and population safety. The Secretary General paused. I could see her earpiece blinking, receiving updates even during the broadcast. Her face went pale. The cause of these failures remains unknown. Until systems can be restored, local authorities should assume full emergency powers. Citizens are advised to shelter in place and await further instruction through local emergency broadcast networks where available. Arden's voice cut through the tension from his cybersecurity station. The pattern analysis is complete. These aren't random failures. Look at this timeline. His screens showed a global map with failure cascades. Infrastructure dependencies. Each nation that went dark had critical interdependencies with systems that failed 12 to 16 hours earlier. Someone mapped our vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically. The weight of his words settled over us like a physical force. Not an accident. Not a natural cascade failure. Deliberate. May God help us all. This concludes Emergency Broadcast Authority. Local stations, please maintain. The lights died. Emergency power kicked in after exactly 4 seconds. I counted them. Red emergency lighting bathed the operations center in hellish shadows. The main screens flickered, showing battery backup status. 72 hours maximum power. Generator systems report malfunction. Talia announced, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Primary and backup power grid connections severed. We're on isolated battery systems only. Through the reinforced windows, I could see Manhattan below us. Street lights dead. Building lights winking out in sequence as emergency power reserves depleted. Car headlights moving in slow rivers of evacuation traffic. But even those were thinning. How long before we lose communication with the outside entirely? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Satellite uplinks will fail when battery power runs out, Talia replied. Maybe sooner if the satellite network continues degrading. We've lost contact with 60% of our communication satellites in the past 8 hours. Valrin was staring at his tablet, the glow illuminating his face. I'm getting intermittent signals from government emergency frequencies. There might be extraction protocols for essential personnel. The way he said it made something cold settle in my stomach. What kind of extraction protocols? The kind where they don't tell you where they're taking you. His eyes met mine. Or if they're bringing everyone. Outside, the sound of helicopters grew louder, then faded. Emergency vehicles wailed in the distance, but the sounds were becoming sporadic. The great machine of civilization winding down gear by gear. Cassira spoke into the dim red light. We need to make a decision. Stay here and maintain what little coordination we can until power dies, or abandon our posts and try to survive like everyone else. I looked around at my team, people I'd worked with through hurricanes, earthquakes, conflicts, famines. We'd coordinated aid for millions, managed crises across continents. Now we faced the ultimate crisis, and our tools were failing one by one. We document everything, I decided. Every report, every communication, every failure. If civilization survives this, they need to know how it happened, how it could happen again. The tablet in my hands showed our emergency communication log. 847 critical messages pending transmission, but nowhere to send them. 47 nations dark and silent. The United Nations Emergency Operations Center, designed to coordinate global crisis response, reduced to a battery-powered bunker watching the world go offline. Through the emergency radio, scattered voices continued trying to establish contact. Isolated emergency services, military units, survivor groups. the death throes of a connected world, fragmenting into isolated pockets of desperate humanity. "Sir," Talia's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm losing contact with our last satellite uplink. In approximately 40 minutes, we'll be as isolated as everyone else." I began typing the final official report of the UN Emergency Operations Center, knowing it might never be transmitted, never be read by anyone with authority to act on it. But documentation is what we do, what we've always done, even when there's no one left to coordinate with. Log ends, power failure imminent, switching to local emergency protocols. Final automated timestamp, Day 4, Hour 76 post-initial blackout. Status: global communications failure, civilization status unknown. Personal log, Day 7, morning, estimated. Former UN Emergency Operations Center. Daxon Rill, Emergency Coordinator. Status: unknown. Recording on portable device, battery 67%. The silence is what gets to you first. No electrical hum, no air conditioning, no distant traffic. Just the sound of our breathing and the occasional crash of glass from the streets below as people break into abandoned storefronts. We've been scavenging for 3 days now. Funny how quickly emergency coordination becomes finding canned food in executive break rooms. The UN building has enough supplies to keep us alive for maybe 2 weeks if we're careful. Water's the bigger problem. The pumps died with the power grid. Talia's proved invaluable. While the rest of us were still thinking like bureaucrats, she was already stripping copper wire from conference room projectors and building a solar charging station on the roof. "Low-tech solutions for a no-tech world," she said, coiling Ethernet cable into neat loops. Her communications background included field engineering, something I never thought to ask about in our years working together. Found something interesting in the Secretary General's emergency cache yesterday. Not just survival supplies, communication equipment. Short-range radio transceivers, the kind used for disaster relief operations. Talia got them working within an hour. Testing. This is UN emergency coordination, seeking contact with any active emergency services. Please respond on any frequency. Her voice echoed through the empty operations center, now lit only by LED lanterns we'd salvaged from emergency kits. The response came at 1,347 hours. UN emergency. This is FDNY Station 23. We read you. Are you still operational? First human contact in 4 days. Kasaira actually cried. We've established communication with 7 local groups, 3 fire stations, 2 police precincts, a hospital emergency team, and something calling itself Brooklyn Mutual Aid Network. Apparently a group of ham radio operators who organized neighborhood resource sharing. The picture they're painting isn't good. Manhattan's evacuation was chaos. Most people fled north or west, but the transportation systems failed before everyone could get out. Estimate 400,000 people still in the city, mostly in smaller groups like ours, trying to survive on whatever they can scavenge. But here's what's strange. The infrastructure failures aren't random. Vailrin noticed it first during his scouting runs. "Look at this," he said, spreading out a hand-drawn map of Manhattan. Red X's marked every major utility junction, communication hub, and transportation node. The failures follow the critical infrastructure map from our emergency planning documents. Someone knew exactly what to hit. I asked him to elaborate, but he got that careful look again. The one he's been wearing since day 4. Arden's been working on his laptop, running it off Talia's solar setup. His cybersecurity background is proving more relevant than any of us expected. "I've been analyzing the failure patterns," he reported during this morning's team meeting. The timing was precise. Each system was taken offline exactly when it would cause maximum cascade effect to dependent systems. "So this was definitely an attack?" Kasaira asked. "More than that. This was an attack designed by someone with intimate knowledge of global infrastructure interdependencies. Someone with access to contingency planning documents, system maps, vulnerability assessments. The implications hung heavy in the stale air of our improvised headquarters. We'd been thinking about external threats, cyber terrorists, foreign state actors, catastrophic accidents. But what if the threat came from inside the systems we'd spent our careers protecting? Radio contact with Fire Station 23 at 0900 hours brought disturbing news. We've had contact with some kind of government coordination team. They're offering extraction for essential personnel, but they won't say where they're taking people. And the people who agree to extraction, we don't hear from them again. Valerin shifted uncomfortably. Maybe they're being taken somewhere safer. Continuity of government facilities, emergency bunkers. Or maybe they're being removed as witnesses, Arden said quietly. The tension in the room was palpable. For years of working together, and suddenly I was looking at my team differently. Who among us had the security clearances that would put them on an extraction list? Who might have known about vulnerability assessments that could enable this kind of coordinated attack? Water run this afternoon. The UN building's emergency reserves are running low, and the Hudson River is our closest reliable source. Talia rigged a solar-powered water purification system from components we salvaged from the building's emergency supplies and the chemistry lab on the 15th floor. The walk to the river showed us what Manhattan looks like 7 days after civilization stopped working. Abandoned cars form barriers across major intersections. Broken glass crunches underfoot on every sidewalk. But it's not empty. We saw dozens of people, mostly moving in small groups, all carrying supplies. Everyone avoiding eye contact, everyone armed with something improvised. At the water collection point, we met a family from Queens who'd been walking for 3 days. The father, Miguel, had worked in telecommunications maintenance. The fiber optic lines were cut, he told us. Not damaged, cut. Clean slices through major trunk lines in over 40 locations simultaneously. Someone with detailed network maps did this. More evidence supporting Arden's assessment. But evidence of what exactly? And more importantly, what did it mean for our survival? Back at base, Kasaira pulled me aside. Daxon, we need to talk about Valerin. Her crisis psychology training had her reading behavioral cues I was missing. He's exhibiting signs of divided loyalty stress. He knows something about these extraction teams, and it's eating at him. You think he's compromised? I think he's torn between loyalty to us and loyalty to something else. That makes him unpredictable. As I write this, Valerin is on watch duty, monitoring radio frequencies from the roof. Talia's working on extending our communication range. She thinks she can boost the signal enough to reach other survivor groups outside the city. Arden's still analyzing failure patterns, building a database of evidence on his laptop. And Kasaira's watching all of us, looking for signs of psychological breakdown. The radio crackled to life. Any station, any station. This is Dr. Sarah Chun, Mount Sinai Hospital Emergency Coordination. We have critical medical supplies but need technical expertise for power restoration. Can anyone assist? Talia was already reaching for the microphone. Mount Sinai, this is UN Emergency Coordination. We have technical personnel. What kind of assistance do you need? We need someone who understands hospital power systems. Our backup generators failed, and we have patients on life support running on portable battery units. We can offer medical supplies and food in exchange for technical help. I looked around at my team. A week ago, we coordinated global humanitarian response. Now we were negotiating local resource trades, community by community, block by block. Mount Sinai, we can have technical personnel there within 4 hours. We'll need safe passage guarantees and details on compensation.
Understood, un emergency.
We'll send a guide to meet you at 86th and Lexington. Password will be Hippocratic. Survival in the post-collapse world, it turns out, looks a lot like the humanitarian work we used to coordinate internationally. Resource assessment, skill trading, community cooperation, security negotiations. The scale is smaller, but the principles are the same. Except now, instead of coordinating aid shipments to distant crisis zones, we're the crisis zone. And the aid we're providing is our own expertise, traded for the basic necessities of survival. Talia's voice from the radio. UN emergency to all stations. We're establishing regular communication schedules. Daily check-ins at 0800, 1200, and 1800 hours. Let's build a network. Maybe that's how civilization rebuilds itself. Not from the top down with governments and institutions, but from the bottom up. Community by community, skill trade by skill trade, radio call by radio call. But first we have to survive long enough to find out. Personal log and day 7. Battery status, 52%. Next entry, after Mount Sinai mission. Team status, intact but strained. Water supply, 4 days remaining. Food supply, 11 days remaining. UN emergency coordination log, day 12 post-collapse. Operator, Daxon Rill. Location, abandoned subway maintenance tunnel, Lower Manhattan. Time, 0347 hours. Estimated. The static from Talia's makeshift radio fills our concrete tomb like the breathing of some dying beast. 12 days since the last official transmission. 12 days since the world went dark, and I'm starting to think we're the ones who've been stumbling around blind. Valerin hasn't looked me in the eye since yesterday. Not since Kasaira found the encrypted radio hidden in his pack. Military grade. The kind that requires authorization codes I know damn well the UN Emergency Coordination Office never issued. Dax. Talia's voice cuts through the static, sharp with exhaustion. Her jury-rigged monitoring station, a Frankenstein of salvaged UN equipment and scavenged electronics, bathes her face in sickly green light. I'm picking up coordinated transmissions, multiple frequencies. Someone's still running large-scale operations out there. Arden looks up from her laptop, its screen reflecting off her glasses in the dim emergency lighting we've strung throughout this tunnel system. For the past 3 days, she's been obsessing over the infrastructure failure patterns, mapping them against everything from solar flare data to economic indicators. The woman hasn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch. Define large-scale, I say, though my attention keeps drifting to Valerin. He's positioned himself near the tunnel entrance again. Claims it's for security, but security from what? We're 40 feet underground in a maintenance system that doesn't appear on any public maps. Air traffic control patterns, Talia says, adjusting her headphones. Fuel depot coordination, supply chain logistics. This isn't some ragtag survivor network, Dax. This is organized. Governmental. The temperature down here holds steady at 58 degrees, but I feel cold spreading through my chest. Governmental operations, which means some governments are still functional, which means some people knew this was coming. Valerin, I turn to face him directly. Want to explain why you're not surprised? He doesn't flinch. 12 years of working UN crisis coordination, you learn to read body language. Valerin's showing all the signs of a man who's been caught but isn't sorry about it. Shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes meeting mine with that particular brand of defiance that comes from believing you're the only one making the hard choices. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, he says. Kasaira pushes herself up from where she's been monitoring our psychological states. Apparently that's a thing now, having someone whose job it is to make sure we're not losing our minds. The irony isn't lost on me. Valerin, your stress indicators have been elevated for the past 4 days. That's not hope. That's guilt. Guilt. Arden's voice carries an edge I haven't heard before. What exactly do you have to feel guilty about? Valerin reaches into his jacket, slowly telegraphing the movement. Professional courtesy among people who understand that sudden movements in confined spaces can get you killed. He produces the radio Kasaira found. Military green, antenna fully extended, power indicator showing full battery. Extract Team 7 has been maintaining contact, he says. They're 3 hours out. The words hit the tunnel like a physical force. Talia spins in her chair, headphones sliding off one ear. Arden's fingers freeze over her keyboard. Kasaira takes an unconscious step backward. Extract team, I repeat. The phrase tastes wrong in my mouth. Whose extract team? Department of Continuity Operations. Valerin's voice carries that tone bureaucrats use when they're delivering information they know will destroy everything you thought you understood. They've been monitoring UN personnel since the infrastructure failures began. Priority assets are being relocated to secure facilities. Priority assets. Arden closes her laptop with deliberate care. The sound echoes off the concrete walls like a gunshot. Is that what we are, Valerin? Assets. You're my team, he says, and there's genuine emotion in his voice now. You're the best crisis coordination specialists the UN has ever trained. The world is going to need rebuilding, and rebuilding requires expertise. Talia pulls off her headphones completely. How long have you been in contact with them? Since day 3. The admission hangs in the air like smoke. Day 3. When we made the decision to abandon the Manhattan Coordination Center. When we voted unanimously, I thought, to maintain independence rather than risk exposure to potential hostile forces. When Valerin argued most strongly for independent operation. Son of a bitch, I whisper. You've been reporting our position this entire time. I've been ensuring our survival, Valerin snaps back. Do you have any idea what's happening out there? The casualty estimates? The infrastructure damage? This isn't some temporary setback, Dax. This is societal collapse on a scale humanity has never experienced. Kasyra steps between us before I can respond. Professional hazard, crisis psychologists develop an instinct for preventing violence before it escalates. Everyone needs to take a breath. Valerin, explain the extraction process. What exactly are they offering? Safe passage to a secure facility in upstate New York. Full laboratory access for Talia's communications work. Computing resources for Arden's analysis. Psychological support staff. He looks at me. Command position in the new emergency coordination hierarchy. And if we refuse? Arden asks. Valerin's silence is answer enough. The radio in his hand crackles to life. Male voice, professional tone, slight static indicating long-range transmission. Phoenix Nest, this is Extract 7. We're 15 minutes from your beacon. Confirm package ready for transport. Valerin raises the radio toward his mouth. But I'm faster. 12 years of crisis coordination doesn't just teach you to read body language. It teaches you to act when action is required. I knock the radio from his hand. It hits the concrete floor and slides toward the tunnel entrance. Dax, what the hell? Phoenix Nest. I grab the radio before he can recover it. You gave them a fucking code name for our location? It's standard extraction protocol. Whose protocol? Arden is on her feet now, laptop forgotten. Because I've been analyzing communication patterns for the past 72 hours, and I'm seeing some very interesting correlations. She moves to her equipment bag, pulls out a tablet. The screen shows a map of North America with overlay data I don't immediately recognize. Transmission patterns, maybe, or power grid status. The infrastructure failures weren't random, she says. They followed a specific sequence. Targeted disruption of communication nodes, power distribution centers, transportation hubs. But here's the interesting part. She taps the screen, zooming in on the eastern seaboard. Some areas were bypassed entirely. Military installations, certain government facilities, specific corporate data centers. That doesn't mean Valerin starts. It means someone had a priority list, Arden interrupts. Someone knew exactly which systems to hit and which to preserve. This wasn't a collapse, Valerin. This was surgery. The radio in my hands crackles again. Phoenix Nest, confirm status. We're showing elevated activity at your location. I look at the radio, then at my team. Talia watching me with those sharp analyst eyes. Arden waiting for my decision with her fingers hovering over her tablet. Kasyra maintaining professional calm while probably calculating the psychological impact of whatever choice I make. And Valerin, standing near the tunnel entrance, looking like a man who's about to lose everything he's spent 2 weeks trying to protect. Extract 7. I say into the radio, this is Phoenix Nest. We're going to need more time. Negative Phoenix Nest. Weather window is closing. Transport departs in 10 minutes with or without package. I release the transmission button. In the silence that follows, I can hear all of us breathing. The sound of 5 people who've spent 12 days learning to survive together, realizing that survival might require choosing between loyalty and safety. 10 minutes, Cassira says quietly. That's not enough time to process this properly. The psychological impact of forced relocation, separation from established survival routines. The psychological impact of staying here might be death, Valrin interrupts. You've all seen the reports, the casualty estimates, the infrastructure damage. How long do you think we can survive on scavenged supplies in abandoned tunnels? Talia stands up from her workstation. Actually, I've been thinking about that. She gestures to her jury-rigged equipment. I've made contact with 7 other survivor groups in the past 48 hours. Engineers, medical personnel, logistics specialists, people with skills. We're not as alone as we thought. Survivor groups, Valrin says, or government monitoring stations pretending to be survivor groups. The accusation hits like cold water. Talia's face goes pale in the green light from her monitors. You son of a bitch, she whispers. You think I can't tell the difference between a survivor and a handler? I think you want to believe in the possibility of independent survival, Valrin says. We all do, but wanting something doesn't make it viable. Arden looks up from her tablet. Valrin, I need you to answer a question, and I need you to answer it honestly. Did your Department of Continuity Operations contacts give you any information about the cause of the infrastructure failures? The question hangs in the tunnel air like a blade. Valrin's face shifts, and I see the moment he decides to tell the truth. They said it was a stress test, he admits. A way to identify critical vulnerabilities in global infrastructure before a real attack could exploit them. The words hit me like a physical blow. A stress test, controlled collapse scenarios, identify breaking points, test emergency response capabilities, evaluate personnel reliability under extreme conditions.
Jesus Christ, Talia Breates.
How many people died in their stress test? That's not. The point is, they're trying to prevent larger casualties. The point, I cut him off, is that they killed thousands of people to run a fucking experiment. The radio crackles again. Phoenix Nest, this is Extract 7. We have visual on your location. Exiting vehicles now. Confirm package readiness. Above us, I hear the unmistakable sound of boots on pavement. Multiple sets. Professional spacing. Military precision. Decision time, Cassira says quietly. I look at each of them. Talia, still wearing her headphones around her neck like a talisman. Arden, clutching her tablet like it contains all the answers we need. Cassira, watching us with the clinical focus of someone whose job is keeping people sane in insane situations. And Valrin, who spent 2 weeks earning my trust while planning to betray it. The footsteps above us are getting closer. UN Emergency Coordination Log, Day 12 Post-Collapse. Operator, Daxon Rill. Location, Abandoned Subway Maintenance Tunnel, Lower Manhattan. Time, 0402 hours. Estimated. Status, Priority Classification Override. The extraction team waited exactly 10 minutes before moving on. Professional discipline, military efficiency, the kind of operational precision that comes from following orders regardless of outcome. They left behind a radio. Deliberate, Arden says, turning the device over in her hands. Standard military field communications unit, but the encryption signatures are all wrong. They wanted us to have this. Talia's already connecting it to her monitoring station. Her fingers move with the kind of focused intensity I've learned to recognize. The same concentration she showed during the early days when she was still trying to maintain contact with UN regional offices. Back when we thought this was temporary. Getting multiple channels, she reports. Encrypted but not military standard. Corporate protocols, maybe? Financial sector. Cassira sits against the tunnel wall, notepad balanced on her knees. She's been documenting everything since Valerin's confession an hour ago. Professional habit, crisis psychologists are trained to maintain records even when the world ends. Especially when the world ends. Valerin, I say, though he's been silent since the extraction team left. Your Department of Continuity Operations. They're not military, are they? He shakes his head without looking up from where he's staring at the concrete floor. Public-private partnership. Defense contractors, infrastructure corporations, emergency management firms. Think of it as disaster capitalism with government oversight. Or government oversight with disaster capitalism, Arden mutters, connecting her laptop to Talia's communication array. Same result either way. The radio crackles to life. Different voice this time, older, authoritative, speaking with the kind of casual confidence that comes from never doubting your orders will be followed. Control, this is Site 7. Package declined extraction. Proceeding to Phase 3 protocols. Copy Site 7. Authorization confirmed. Begin documentation procedures. Talia adjusts her headphones, fingers flying over frequency controls. I'm getting similar transmissions from Jesus, Dax. Dozens of sites. They're running coordinated operations across the entire eastern seaboard. Documentation procedures. I repeat. What the hell does that mean? Valerin finally looks up. Behavioral analysis. They're studying survivor group responses to the stress test. Social dynamics, resource allocation strategies, leadership emergence patterns. The words hit me like ice water. We're laboratory rats. Your valuable data points, Valerin corrects. The whole point of the exercise was to understand how critical personnel respond to infrastructure collapse. Which individuals adapt, which ones break, which ones develop innovative solutions. Arden's laptop screen fills with data streams. Network traffic analysis, communication patterns, system architecture maps. The kind of technical documentation that looks like gibberish to most people but tells a story to someone who knows how to read it. Valerin, she says without looking away from her screen, I need you to understand something. This wasn't a stress test. This was beta testing. What's the difference? A stress test evaluates existing systems under pressure. Beta testing evaluates new systems before full deployment. She turns the laptop toward us. The screen shows a network diagram, nodes, connections, data flows. But the architecture is all wrong. Too complex, too integrated, too dependent on systems that don't exist yet. This is a blueprint, she continues. Infrastructure design for something that hasn't been built. They didn't collapse the old system to test it. They collapsed it to clear space for a new one. Talia pulls off her headphones. Arden's right. I'm monitoring communication protocols that don't match any existing standards. Military, civilian, corporate, none of them. This is something else entirely. The radio crackles again. Different frequency this time, cleaner signal. Phoenix Control, this is Research Station Alpha. Behavioral data collection complete for Grid Section 7. Subject groups showing expected adaptation patterns. Request permission to initiate Phase 4. Copy, Research Station Alpha. Phase 4 authorization pending completion of psychological profiles. Maintain observation protocols. Kasaira stops writing. Her pen hovers over the notepad like she's afraid to document what she just heard. Subject groups, she says quietly. Not survivor groups. Not refugee populations. Subjects. I take the radio from Arden, key the transmission button. Research Station Alpha, this is Grid Section 7. What exactly is Phase 4? Dead silence. Then, unknown station. You are broadcasting on a restricted frequency. Identify yourself immediately. Daxon Rill, UN Emergency Coordination Specialist. Serial number 7749 Delta. I'm requesting information about ongoing operations in my area of responsibility. Another pause. Longer this time. When the voice returns, it carries a different tone. Cautious. Calculating. Mr. Rill, this is Director Harrison, Department of Continuity Operations. You were scheduled for extraction 30 minutes ago. I declined extraction. I'm exercising my right as a UN official to remain in the field and coordinate emergency response efforts. Mr. Rill, I'm afraid your UN credentials are no longer relevant. The United Nations suspended operations 18 hours after the infrastructure failures began. You're currently operating without authority in a declared emergency zone. The words hit me like a physical blow. Suspended operations. The UN 93 years of international cooperation, humanitarian response, global coordination. Suspended. That's impossible. I manage. I'm transmitting documentation to your current location, Director Harrison says. Official dissolution notice, signed by the Security Council during their final emergency session. The organization was deemed too structurally vulnerable to maintain operations during global infrastructure recovery. Talia's equipment starts receiving data. Text files, official documents, digital signatures. She prints them on a portable printer we salvaged from the UN building, one of the few pieces of equipment still working without network connectivity. I read the dissolution notice twice before the words make sense.
Official en lettres red.
Security Council signatures. Emergency powers invocation. Temporary suspension of all UN operations pending infrastructure restoration and security evaluation. Temporary. The word might as well be permanent. Phase 4, Mr. Rill, Director Harrison continues, is integration. Subject groups that demonstrate viable survival strategies and stable social dynamics are offered positions in the new infrastructure deployment. Leadership roles, technical positions, administrative functions. And the groups that don't demonstrate viable strategies? Kasaira asks, leaning close to the radio, are provided with humanitarian support until alternative arrangements can be made. The euphemism hangs in the tunnel air like poison gas. Alternative arrangements. In crisis management, that phrase never means anything good. Dax, she says, I'm intercepting data streams from 47 research stations. They're not just monitoring survivor groups. They're conducting social experiments, testing different stress variables, resource scarcity levels, information availability. She brings up a map overlay. North America divided into grid sections, each labeled with experimental parameters. Food availability percentages, communication access levels, security threat indicators. We're grid section 7, she continues. High skill group, moderate resource access, limited information availability. They've been controlling our environment from the beginning. The supply caches we found, Talia realizes, the working communications equipment, the abandoned facility locations. None of it was random. Controlled variables, Kasaira agrees. They're studying how high-skill groups adapt to specific stress conditions. I key the radio again. Director Harrison, how many people died in your controlled experiment? Mr. Rill, you're misunderstanding the scope of this operation. The infrastructure failures were inevitable. Global economic instability, climate change impacts, cyber warfare capabilities. The old system was failing regardless. We simply chose to control the timing and manner of that failure. How many people died? Initial casualty estimates suggest approximately 12% population impact. However, modeling indicates that uncontrolled collapse would have resulted in 40 to 60% casualties over a longer time frame. 12%. In the United States alone, that's 40 million people. Globally, I can't even process the numbers. You murdered 40 million Americans. I say, we prevented the murder of 200 million Americans, Harrison replies, and established protocols for preventing similar catastrophes in other nations. This operation represents the largest successful disaster mitigation effort in human history. Arden's screen shows new data streams, real-time communication between research stations, casualty reports, resource allocation protocols. The infrastructure for managing hundreds of survivor groups across multiple experimental conditions. Dax, she says quietly, they're planning to do this again. Other countries, other continents. This was just the prototype. The radio crackles. Mr. Rill, your integration assessment is complete. You and your team have demonstrated exceptional adaptation capabilities and innovative problem-solving skills. We're prepared to offer you senior positions in the new infrastructure deployment. What if we refuse? Then you'll be transferred to a humanitarian support facility until alternative arrangements can be finalized. I look at my team, Talia monitoring communications that reveal the scope of a global conspiracy. Arden analyzing data that shows millions of deaths dismissed as acceptable losses. Kasaira documenting the psychological impact of discovering that your own government views you as a laboratory animal. And Vaelrin, who's known the truth for 9 days and chose to protect us by helping them monitor us. Director Harrison, I say into the radio, I need to discuss this with my team. How long do we have? Phase 4 implementation begins in 6 hours. Integration decisions must be finalized before then. 6 hours to decide whether to join the organization that murdered 40 million people to save 200 million, or refuse and face alternative arrangements. 6 hours to choose between complicity and consequences. The radio goes silent. Above us, the city continues dying. Around us, the tunnel walls seem to press closer, like the whole world is collapsing into this single decision point. Well, Kasaira says, closing her notepad, now we know the truth. Now we know the truth. And the truth is worse than anything we imagined. UN Emergency Log, Day 47 Post-Declaration. Coordinator, Daxon Rill. Location, Abandoned Relay Station Delta 7. Status, Attempting global network restoration. The satellite dish groaned against November wind as Talia adjusted the alignment for the 3rd time. Her hands, steady despite the cold, moved across jury-rigged controls that would have made our old UN tech department weep. 47 days since the world went dark, and she'd somehow cobbled together a communication array from spare parts and stubborn determination. Signal lock acquired, she called down from the tower. Arden, are you seeing the authentication protocols on your end? Below, hunched over a laptop connected to God knows how many improvised components, Arden's fingers flew across keys worn smooth by desperate use. I'm in the system, but these encryption layers, whoever designed this wanted to make sure only the right people could restore communications. The right people. That phrase had taken on new meaning since we'd learned the truth. The global collapse hadn't been an accident or attack. It had been a test. A coordinated experiment to see how quickly humanity could adapt when our technological crutches were kicked out from under us. Vaelrin approached from the relay station's main building, his government-issued radio crackling with static. My contacts are standing by. Once we establish the connection, they'll provide authentication keys for the primary satellites. I studied his face, searching for any sign of the deception that had nearly torn our group apart 3 days ago. The revelation that he'd been in contact with an extraction team, that he'd known more about our situation than he'd admitted, had shattered something fundamental between us. But Kasaira had been right when she'd pointed out that his connections might be our only path to restoration. Trust, she'd said during our brutal confrontation in the station's break room, isn't about past honesty. It's about present necessity. Daxon. Talia's voice carried a note of urgency. I'm picking up transmissions. Multiple sources. There are other teams attempting restoration simultaneously. My heart hammered against my ribs. Other teams meant other survivors. More importantly, it meant coordination, the kind of global cooperation we thought was dead and buried under the collapse. Can you isolate the signals? I called up, working on it. Arden, I need you to run frequency analysis on these incoming data streams. Arden's screen filled with scrolling code, patterns of digital communication that looked like hieroglyphics to me but apparently made perfect sense to him. These aren't random attempts. Someone's coordinating this. Multiple restoration points activating in sequence across time zones. Vaelrin's radio crackled to life. A voice I didn't recognize spoke in crisp, official tones. Restoration Team 7, this is Central Command. Confirm your status and preparedness for Phase 3 authentication. Vaelrin looked at me, waiting. The The radio hung between us like a bridge we could either cross or burn. "Do it," I said. "Central Command, this is Restoration Team 7. We have communication array, operational, and cybersecurity specialists standing by for authentication protocols. Civilian Emergency Coordinator Daxon Rill is team leader." A pause. Then, "Acknowledged, Team 7. Be advised, Phase 3 will require simultaneous activation with 17 other restoration points globally. Failure of any single point compromises entire network restoration. Are you prepared for coordinated activation in T-12 minutes? 12 minutes. After 47 days of silence, the entire world's communication network could be restored in 12 minutes. If we didn't screw it up. "Talia, status report," I shouted. "Satellite lock is solid. I've got telemetry from 3 primary communication satellites. They're all showing green for restoration protocols. Arden, authentication systems are loaded. I've identified the security keys we'll need." "But Daxon," he looked up from his screen, expression grim. "Once we do this, we're going to see everything. Every country that went dark deliberately. Every population that was left to think the world was ending while their governments sat safely in bunkers, watching the experiment play out." The weight of that knowledge settled over me like lead blankets. For 47 days, we'd believed civilization had collapsed. We'd mourned the death of global cooperation, the end of the connected world. But some nations had simply disconnected, pulled the plug, watched from the shadows while the rest of us scrambled to survive. T-8 minutes, Valerin's radio announced. Kasaira emerged from the station building, where she'd been monitoring radio frequencies for any signs of civilian distress calls. "I'm picking up scattered survivor groups across 3 continents. They're all attempting the same thing we are. Whatever this restoration is, it's global." T-5 minutes. "All teams report status." Valerin keyed his radio. "Team 7 ready for coordination." Through the static, I heard other voices responding from around the world. Team 3 from somewhere in Asia. Team 12 from what sounded like South America. Team 15's heavily accented English suggested Northern Europe. 17 teams total, scattered across the globe, all working to restore what had been deliberately severed. T-2 minutes. Prepare for synchronized activation. Talia climbed down from the satellite array, her face flushed with cold and adrenaline. "Whatever happens next, we did this together. We survived together." Arden's fingers hovered over his keyboard. "Authentication protocols ready." T-30 seconds. I thought about the world we'd lost or thought we'd lost. The instant global communication, the assumption that help was always just a phone call away, the belief that our technological civilization was unshakable. We'd learned how fragile it all was. But we'd also learned how resilient people could be when everything fell apart. T-10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. Kasaira reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "Ready." 6, 5, 4. Execute restoration protocols. Now. Arden's fingers flew across the keyboard. Talia threw switches on her improvised control panel. Valerin spoke rapid authentication codes into his radio. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then every screen in the relay station blazed to life. Communication panels that had been dark for 47 days suddenly showed green lights. Status boards displayed active connections to communication satellites I'd assumed were dead. And on Arden's screen, a map of the world appeared, dotted with active communication nodes that had been there all along, hidden and waiting. Global communication network restored. A calm voice announced through speakers that hadn't worked since the collapse. "All regional emergency coordination centers, please report status." The responses came flooding in. Voices from every continent, speaking in dozen languages, all reporting the same thing. Their infrastructure had been intact, their population safe, their governments monitoring the entire experiment. But not all voices were official. Mixed in with the government reports were civilian groups like ours. Survivors who had struggled and adapted and built new communities from the wreckage of what they thought was the end of the world. "This is fascinating," Arden said, his voice hollow. The network was never truly down. It was just compartmentalized, hidden from anyone without the right access codes. On the communication board, a priority message blinked urgently. I activated it. All restoration teams, this is Emergency Coordination Central. Your efforts have successfully re-established global communications. Phase 4 will commence in 24 hours. Integration of survivor communities into restored global infrastructure. Stand by for detailed instructions. Phase 4. There were more phases. This had all been planned, coordinated, managed from the beginning. Talia stared at the functioning equipment around us. 47 days. We thought the world had ended. We mourned civilization itself. And it was all a test, I finished. A test to see how we'd respond when everything we depended on disappeared. Valerin's radio crackled again. Restoration Team 7, be advised. Your performance during the isolation period has been exemplary. Your team has been selected for advanced coordination roles in the new decentralized emergency response network. Selected, as if we'd been job applicants rather than desperate survivors. But as I looked around at Talia's ingenious technical solutions, Arden's tireless investigation work, Kasira's psychological insights that had held us together, and even Valerin's complex loyalties that had ultimately proven crucial, I realized something important. We had been tested, and despite everything, the deception, the fear, the moments when we'd nearly broken apart, we had passed. The question now was what kind of world we were reconnecting to, and whether the lessons we'd learned in isolation would survive in a reality where the collapse had never been real for everyone. Team 7, the radio announced, prepare for comprehensive debriefing and integration protocols. The experiment is complete. Welcome back to the grid. I stared out the window at the horizon, where the first aircraft we'd seen in 47 days was approaching our position. Soon, we'd learn the full scope of what had been done to us and why. But for now, in this moment between isolation and integration, I keyed the radio one last time. This is Coordinator Daxon Rill, Team 7. We're ready for whatever comes next. But understand this, we're not the same people who went dark 47 days ago. The world you're welcoming us back to better be ready for who we've become. The aircraft touched down outside our relay station, kicking up dust and dead leaves. Through the windows, I could see official figures in clean uniforms stepping out. Our isolation was over. Our real test was just beginning. Personal log Daxon Rill. Date: Day 73 post-declaration. Location: Geneva Emergency Coordination Center Rebuilt Wing. Classification: Personal reflection. Note: this is no longer an official UN emergency log. Those protocols ended the day we learned the truth. What follows is my personal account of what we've built from the ashes of trust. 3 weeks since reconnection. 26 days since we learned that our 47 days of hell had been someone's carefully orchestrated field test. I'm writing this in what used to be my old office at the UN Emergency Coordination Center, though nothing here looks the same. The building itself survived, of course. Most infrastructure did. It was only we, the test subjects, who experienced collapse. Through my window, I can see the new communication arrays Talia designed. They're beautiful in their brutal honesty. Visible, redundant, impossible to shut down without physical destruction. No more hidden kill switches. No more compartmentalized networks that can vanish at the flip of a switch. Trust but verify was an old Cold War saying. Our new motto is simpler. Trust nothing you can't see, fix, or rebuild yourself. The debriefing sessions ended yesterday. 3 weeks of explaining to panels of officials, many of whom had spent our collapse in climate-controlled bunkers, monitoring our every move, exactly how we'd survive their experiment. They called it invaluable data on crisis resilience and community formation under extreme stress. I called it torture with a research grant. But here's what they didn't expect. We weren't the only ones being tested. Every survivor group, every community that formed during the isolation, every person who learned to live without the grid, we all came back changed. And we all came back together. Cassira called it post-traumatic growth on a civilizational scale. Leave it to our psychologists to find the technical term for what feels like humanity growing claws. The official report classified 17 nations as participating observers and 43 as test subjects. Participating observers maintained full infrastructure while monitoring test subject populations. The goal, they said, was to understand how quickly modern civilization could recover from complete technological collapse. What they learned was that we don't just recover, we adapt. And we remember, Arden's new position is Director of Transparency Protocols. Every piece of global infrastructure now has public oversight systems. Every emergency network has civilian operators. Every test requires informed consent from every participant. His investigation skills, honed during our isolation, now scrutinize every official narrative before it reaches the public. Never again, he told the Oversight Committee during his appointment hearing, will global infrastructure be weaponized against civilian populations, not for tests, not for experiments, not for any reason. Talia runs the new decentralized communication project. The system she built from scrap at Relay Station Delta 7 is now the template for communication networks worldwide. Redundant, visible, locally controlled, impossible to shut down from a central authority. Her technical brilliance, forged in desperation, now protects millions from ever experiencing what we went through. Vailrin's role is the most complex. He's our liaison with what they're calling reformed governmental structures. His ability to navigate between official protocols and survivor communities makes him invaluable for preventing future experiments. He carries the weight of his initial deception, but he's earned back our trust through relentless transparency about every official communication that crosses his desk. I won't be caught between loyalties again, he told me last week. The people who survived the test, we're the real government now. Cassira established the Collective Trauma Recovery Initiative. Communities worldwide that went through forced isolation are sharing resources, techniques, and support systems. The psychological resilience we developed isn't just personal anymore, it's institutional. As for me, I'm still an emergency coordinator. But the emergencies I coordinate now are different. We don't respond to disasters anymore, we prevent them. Every crisis protocol includes survivor community input. Every emergency plan includes multiple layers of redundancy that can't be disabled by central authority. Most importantly, we've created something they never intended: a global network of communities that learn to survive without them. Yesterday, I received a transmission from a group in rural Canada. They'd been designated a test subject community but had managed to establish communication with 12 other groups during the isolation. They'd built a trading network, shared resources, developed new agricultural techniques, and created governance systems that didn't depend on external authority. We don't want to go back, their message said. We want to stay connected to the new world we built, not the old one that tried to break us. Similar messages are arriving daily. The test subjects are choosing to remain connected to each other rather than reintegrating fully with the systems that deliberately abandoned them. We're not rejecting technology or civilization, we're rebuilding them on our terms. The officials call it concerning fragmentation of global authority. We call it learning. The most profound change isn't in our systems, it's in our assumptions. Before the collapse, we believed global infrastructure was too complex to fail catastrophically. We trusted that our interconnected world was inherently stable. Now we know better. We know that stability requires vigilance, that connection requires intention, and that trust must be earned with every decision. But we also know something else. Humans are more resilient than our systems. When everything we depended on disappeared, we didn't collapse, we evolved. 3 months ago, I wrote emergency protocols designed to maintain order during crisis. Today, I write protocols designed to prevent crisis from being imposed on civilian populations. The difference isn't just procedural, it's philosophical. We no longer plan for disasters. We plan to prevent disasters from being used against us. The new global emergency network isn't centralized in any single location or controlled by any single authority. It's distributed across thousands of communities that learned to survive independently. Each node can function alone but chooses to remain connected. It's stronger than what we had before because it's honest about what we learned. The greatest threat to civilization isn't natural disaster or technological failure. It's the people who claim the authority to shut down civilization for our own good. Tomorrow, Talia and I leave for the first International Survivors Conference. Representatives from every community that endured forced isolation will gather to establish permanent protocols for preventing future experiments. We'll share technical innovations, governance models, and resource management systems that kept us alive when the grid went dark. But most importantly, we'll formalize something that formed organically during our isolation. The understanding that our first loyalty is to each other, not to the systems that claim to serve us. They thought they were testing our resilience. Instead, they taught us that we don't need them as much as they need us. The world didn't end 73 days ago. It was reborn. The emergency alert that started this nightmare declared global collapse. They were right, but not in the way they intended. The old world, the one where civilian populations could be switched off like lights for someone else's curiosity, that world did collapse. What rose from its ashes is something they never planned for. A global civilization that learned to survive without trust, and therefore can survive anything. We are the new normal, connected by choice, not dependency, strong through community, not authority. Prepared for crisis because we know that crisis can come from any direction, including from those who claim to protect us. And we will never go dark again. End personal log. Filed under New Protocols Lessons Learned. Never again. CC All Survivor Community Leaders. CC International Transparency Network. CC Decentralized Emergency Response Coordination. Note: this log is classified as public record and will be transmitted to all nodes in the Survivor network. The age of hidden protocols is over.